The scariest British horror TV shows ever made.
Beasts. Imagine a cottage in the British countryside. Damp stones, peeling wallpaper, a sealed pot hidden in a wall, and something ancient, somehow wrong, wrapped in superstition. This is Beasts, Nigel Kneale's 1976 horror anthology, and in the episode Baby, he proves that the real beast might be what we bury. Beasts is 6 episodes of horror that wear civvies. Not flashy monsters so much as the dread that creeps into everyday life. Superstition, old rituals, guilt, pregnancy, the uncanny beneath the surface. Written by Kneale for ATV, every installment trades in atmospheric tension, hauntings, transformation, folk horror, human weakness. Many fans mark the episode Baby as its darkest hour, and not really because of what it shows, but what it whispers. The pregnant couple, the cottage, the sealed urn in the wall, and that terrible curiosity. The question is not, what is that thing, but why was it hidden? In the episode, Pete Jilks, a vet, moves in with his wife Jo to a rural cottage. During renovation, they uncover a clay urn embedded in a chimney wall, sealed, wax-like, holding a mummified, unidentifiable creature. Jo, heavily pregnant at the time, senses not just danger, but curse, superstition, maternal terror. The urn, locals whisper, may contain a witch's familiar or a spirit bound to the land. They urge destruction. The mystery intensifies. Kneale doesn't assault us. With shock after shock, he builds tension, the weight of silence and of what's seen in the dwindling light. Of course, there were other episodes. The other 5 cement its legacy. Beasts showed TV horror could be slow, thoughtful, deeply psychological, and it influenced later creators to explore fear not just as spectacle but as something intimate, moral, social. Kneale himself called the episode Baby a sort of witchcraft thing in interviews, but Russell T. Davies, Doctor Who writer, found the episode terrifying, and I quote, "Baby is the most frightening thing I've ever seen. Powerful stuff." So if you hear someone saying Beasts is old-fashioned horror, show them Baby. It's not about gore, it's about what fear looks like when you can't name it, and what happens when superstition meets motherhood meets something buried in your wall. Kneale didn't make cheap monsters, he made dread, and Baby is the kind of story that lingers long after the urn is buried. The Nightmare Man. In the summer of 1981, BBC audiences were introduced to a shadowy figure who stalked the misty moors of a remote Scottish island. The series was called The Nightmare Man, a 4-part science fiction thriller that blended horror, mystery, and Cold War paranoia into a uniquely unsettling tale. Adapted from David Wilshire's novel, the series was brought to the screen by Robert Holmes, one of the most celebrated writers in Doctor Who history. Holmes sharpened the narrative into a taut 4-hour drama, stripping away the book's military jargon to emphasize the primal terror of an isolated community besieged by something or someone inhuman. The series was produced by Ron Craddock and directed by Douglas Camfield, another Doctor Who veteran, known for his suspense-driven style. Filming took place largely in Cornwall, standing in for a fictional Scottish island battered by fog and wind. This setting was crucial. The isolation heightened the sense of dread. As villagers realized a killer was loose, their communications cut off, their homes no longer safe. The haunting atmosphere was intensified by composer Geoffrey Bergen, whose eerie, minimalist score crawled under the skin. The cast featured a host of familiar British television faces. Celia Imrie, later celebrated for both comedic and dramatic roles, played a local shopkeeper caught up in the chaos. James Warwick and Maurice Reeves delivered tense, grounded performances as investigators trying to make sense of the killings. The true terror, however, came from the unseen menace itself, referred to only as the Nightmare Man. For much of the series, the creature remained shrouded in mystery, its attacks gruesome and unexplained. Victims are found mauled, their bodies savaged. Was it a man, a beast, or something far stranger? Iconic moments still linger in viewers' memories. The opening attack in the fog, the red-smeared corpses discovered in lonely cottages, and the final revelation, spoilers withheld, that veered from horror into pure science fiction, cementing the story's hybrid identity. The Nightmare Man was praised for its atmosphere and pacing, with critics noting how it felt like a British answer to American horror hits such as Jaws or Alien, and although it ran for just 4 episodes, its influence spread quietly. The blend of police procedural, horror suspense, and science fiction conspiracy can be traced forward into series like The X-Files and Fortitude. It remains a prime example of early 80s British television daring to push into darker, more cinematic territory. Today, The Nightmare Man is remembered as a cult gem, a short, sharp shock that blurred the line between monster story and Cold War paranoia. For those who saw it during its original broadcast, the image of a faceless killer stalking through fog-drenched night has never truly gone away. Hammer House of Horror. When you hear the name Hammer House of Horror, it conjures images of gothic mansions, candlelit corridors, and blood that dripped as red as paint straight from a palette. The 1980 television anthology series was born from the legacy of Hammer Film Productions, the British studio that had, since the 1950s, reinvented horror cinema with Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Mummy. But by the late 70s, Hammer's cinematic fortunes were fading. To survive, they turned to television. Produced for ITV, Hammer House of Horror consisted of 13 standalone episodes, each with a self-contained nightmare. The series was produced at Bray Studios, Hammer's spiritual home, with the chilling, fog-drenched landscapes of Berkshire providing the perfect backdrop. Unlike Hammer's traditional Gothic period pieces, the series shifted into a modern setting. This was deliberate, to prove Hammer could terrify audiences outside of castles and crypts. The creative team included producer Roy Skeggs and writers like Anthony Reed, who had cut his teeth on Doctor Who. Directors such as Peter Sasti and Alan Gibson, veterans of Hammer's film era, brought cinematic craftsmanship to the small screen. The show's format meant it could experiment wildly, from tales of werewolves and witches to voodoo, satanic cults, and even a macabre pet shop. Iconic episodes stand out. The House That Bled to Death, about a family who moves into a home where blood literally seeps from the walls, became infamous when ITV viewers complained it was too horrifying for television. Rude Awakening, starring Denham Elliott, trapped its protagonist in a cycle of recurring nightmares that blurred reality and madness. And The Two Faces of Evil unnerved audiences with a faceless hitchhiker whose identity dissolves into pure terror. Trivia runs thick through the series. It features performances from actors who would go on to international fame, like Pierce Brosnan in his first major screen role, and appearances from Brian Cox, Diana Dawes, and Patricia Quinn of Rocky Horror fame. Each episode's score leaned on eerie synths and strings, which mirrored the rising wave of electronic horror music in the early 80s. Though it lasted only 1 season, Hammer House of Horror has had a long afterlife. It was exported worldwide, finding cult status in Europe, Australia, and especially the US, where its VHS releases made it a horror rental staple in the 80s and 90s. Its anthology structure influenced later shows like Tales from the Crypt, Masters of Horror, and even American Horror Story. Today it's remembered not just as Hammer's last great scream, but as a bridge between Gothic horror tradition and the modern psychological terrors of television. Hammer House of Horror may have flickered briefly, but its images of bleeding walls, cursed children, and devilish pacts continue to haunt the imagination, proof that Hammer's heart still beats strong, even in the dying light of its empire.